And here we are. Hi, Gare. How you doing?
I'm doing well, Henry. How are you?
Doing great. Thanks for joining us for the virtual OC Paracon. So all of you just heard the little intro. You've heard of the titles. We'll talk about the books. We'll talk about everything in just a second. But before we do that, those of you that listen that came over here from Paranormal Perception, you've heard this story before, so it'll be a little bit of a repeat for you. But for everybody else, you're wondering, how did Gare Allen become a paranormal author? Why does he write about the paranormal? Well, you're about to find out why. The why is because, well, I'm not going to tell you. It's not my story. It's Gare's story. Gare, go ahead and start with that. Start with how did the paranormal kind of come into your life?
Well, it all started when I was 12 years old. I was sleeping. I'd actually just gone to bed, and my bedroom was at the top of the stairs on the second level. And I laid down, and the family dog was at my feet, and the bed started to wobble, and suddenly it levitated itself and probably went up a few inches, stayed in the air a few seconds, and then it dropped hard back down. And my limbs moved. The dog jumped off the bed, and I was sort of just frozen, trying to understand what happened. And just then, my brother had been coming up the stairs, and he kind of poked his head through my door and said, "What was that noise?" And there was no radio, no TV on. So he kind of gave me confirmation that he heard the bed, dropping back to the floor as well. And what was interesting is at the time I was teenager, I was big into Ozzy Osbourne and some of the other heavy metal bands at the time. And I had a tapestry on the wall, and which this tapestry had a giant pentagram in the center and then little pentagrams in the corners. And it was missing from my wall. And what was interesting is the tacks that held it up were still there. And I later found that tapestry underneath my bed. And I didn't think anything of it. It was strange. It was weird. I just put it back on the wall. But as I started to study, metaphysics and paranormal activity and things that have happened to other people in a similar way, I started to see that pentagram could actually be used as a portal to let something in, or to let things occur that might not normally occur in our world. And so that always stuck in my mind. So that was the first experience I had that sort of sent me on a path. And my life remained full of paranormal experiences from that point forward, for sure.
Yeah. Let me stick with that one actually. Yeah, at this point, like I said, those of you that came over from Paranormal Perception, you've heard this story like I have a few times now. But let me ask some questions that I'm sure the new viewers are probably asking or want to ask you. Then the first one is, yeah, you mentioned that it pentagrams, things like that could act as a portal. However, I do know that in order for them, most of the time, in order for them to do that, to do their portal thing, the people that are there, we have to open it, so to speak, in a way. They do some kind of ritual or something. You weren't doing anything like that at that age, were you?
I wasn't, but I do know that in some cases, from my understanding of the pentagram, depending on how it's drawn. So if the triangle is pointing downward, it's bringing things through. If it's pointing upward, then it's releasing things. So I don't know how it was positioned on my wall in that respect. But when you have, there's my parents got divorced early, so there was a lot of fighting and things like that. I think there might have been a lot of negativity
Yeah.
in the house that can certainly open you up to those things occurring, or maybe I kind of think of dark entity or dark ghosts, or even demonic activity. They're sort of brought in by us creating an environment that's hospitable for them. So I kind of liken it to, if you leave all your dishes in the sink and there's food, of course the roaches and ants are going to crawl at some point and find that food because you've created that environment for them. But if you keep it clean and tidy, then you won't see bugs, kind of thing. And
Yeah.
I think that's kind of what I think. There might have been a little bit of an environment like in my house at the time that might have allowed that in.
Yeah. Well, and those of you watching this, you know who I'm talking about. A wise medicine man once told me, think beyond written history. There must have been something in that house or in the area at least that was there, like you said, that was feeding on that kind of energy that you guys were not on purpose. That was just your life. But yeah, you're right. You were feeding it, so that was probably its way of saying thanks, Gare. This is my way of saying thank you for giving us that energy that was there.
Well, we were the second owners of the house too, and I had no information on the previous owners or what they may have left behind, what their energy was like. But now I'm thinking also that I guess I could have been paranormal adjacent, because behind the house at the time it was all wooded area, and we at that time around that time they did find a satanic ritual area where people had performed animal sacrifices, unfortunately, behind the house. So I do remember that vividly happening and seeing pictures and things like that. So again, maybe, just being in close proximity to those things happening, that could be part of it as well.
Yeah. Yeah. See, that part I wasn't aware of. So yeah, now honestly, yeah, it does make a lot more sense that something like that happened to you, because like you said, obviously you weren't doing anything like that on purpose.
No, and going back to my analogy, with the bugs, what happens when you go into the kitchen in the middle of the night, flip on the light? They all scatter, right? Because they don't like the light, they like the darkness. So the key is keeping light in your life, keeping light in your house, in your rooms, the whole 9 yards. And so at this point, I go to great lengths, the holy water, sea salt mixture border around the house, being positive. But even with that, I will say that I will come home from somewhere and I will bring a visitor, and things will start happening in the next couple of days. And I'm like, okay, someone tagged along. And it could be innocuous things, things falling or being thrown off the counter, or, batteries being drained. But it's like, you know what? I still don't need that. I still don't need that as part of my day. I got a lot of other things I need to, tend to. So it's interesting, even with all that protection at the lengths I go, I think things can still get in. It's just like if you have your house fumigated, a bug can still get in at some point, right? They're going to find a way, or they build up an immunity to it,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, was that the only experience you had when you were younger, or did you have more after that?
So the most significant experience I had after that, which really sent me into the whole world of the paranormal. I mean, I went head on trying to understand everything metaphysical and paranormal there was. Is I was 25 and I had stopped on a whim. I just pulled into a mall, and I went to a metaphysical bookstore, and I met someone there who channeled their spirit guide, and they went into an unconscious state where the spirit guide took over their body. And so he invited me over to witness it. And even when he invited me over to witness it, I had no idea what he's talking about. No clue what to expect. I was like, okay, I heard there was pizza and beer, so I was game. So I get there, and next thing I know is, he says, hey, I'm going to go ahead and channel. And I said, okay. And he turned the air conditioner down really low, and he goes, it's going to get warm in here. And I said, okay. And I was sitting across the room, and I said, should I move closer? He's like, no, don't worry, you're going to hear it. And I said, okay. And the next thing I know, a few minutes of meditation, and this woman's voice comes out of this man's body and just starts talking to me. And it was the most uncanny thing, because I'm waiting for him to break character, or, the joke to be over. And it wasn't. And even the feel in the room was, this is real. Even though my mind couldn't make sense of it, I knew it was real, and I felt it was real. I felt at peace. It was just something I couldn't quite comprehend. My left brain was struggling, and that's sort of been the theme for me throughout my life, is my left brain versus what I'm experiencing, what's happening in my life, and then what resonates with me on an energy level. And so I listened to this entity talk to me for about 30 minutes. And at the very end, she referenced a dream I had the night before that I had not told anybody about, and actually told me what the dream was. And I said, well, obviously this has to be real. No one can see your dreams. You've never heard that. There's no explanation for that, at least not yet. And so that's what really told me that, hey, there are many things outside of this world. And I couldn't get enough. And I just sort of devoured every book on reincarnation, on channeling, on astral projection, all that stuff, and just ran head first into it. And what sent me to the path of writing was, I kind of wanted to say, hey, here's what's happening to me, because these are significant. They affected me. They were dramatic, and they were emotional, and they were amazing and fantastic. And I said, here's what happened, and here's what I think is happening, why they're happening, and here's the explanation from what I can determine behind it. And it was sort of my attempt at a metaphysics paranormal 101 kind of series in the first books I wrote. Just to say, hey, this is what happened, and maybe it'll help you get past it, because some people had the same experiences, but they weren't intrigued by it like I was. It didn't pique their curiosity. It actually scared the hell out of them. And I was like, so if I can help them and say, hey, here, it's okay, that here's what happened. So, I don't know. I'm not telling you to be glad about it, but I don't think you need to be terrified either. And there are steps you can take to protect yourself. So that was kind of how I was going at it. And that's sort of been my personality is, to help people out where I can. And I think that was the driving force attached to the insatiable curiosity about what else is out there.
Yeah, but you just described earlier a second ago. You're describing honestly why everybody has different experiences. People that I talk to on paranormal perception, just people I meet that are into the paranormal. Everyone is into it for a different reason, but I think ultimately at the end of the day, we can all agree that that feeling that you described, and it's quick. When you see something, you hear something, you feel something. It's yes, no, yes, no, yes, it's happening. No, that can't be real. Yes, it's happening. No, but it can't be. But I'm seeing a shadow. No, it can't. You get that. It happens really, really fast, and that's what builds that excitement. And you're right. I've always said on the show, there's two kinds of people when something like that happens. They either run for the hills, want nothing to do with it, or there's the people like us that want to know more. Like why? Why was the ones that ask the questions? Why? Who was that? Why are they here? All of that. So, with all of that. You've talked about it when you've been on the paranormal perception. You still describe yourself as kind of a skeptical believer. I mean, even with all of that, I mean, how can you still have a little bit of skepticism when all these things are happening in front of you?
I think you can because it's exciting to me at the same time, and I think you want to see what good things you want to see what you want to see. So I'm not above making that happen in my life. There's a cloud that looks like a spaceship. It's probably a spaceship hot behind it. No, calm down. It's just a cloud. So I'm a Capricorn. I'm left brain kind of guy. So I want it to be real and to be. And honestly, if someone came and said, "Hey, Gary, that thing that happened, that was this," and I'm like, "Oh, that's a great explanation." It's like, that's okay. I'm down with that because the other things we can't explain, those are still super real. So it's like, no, I know what happened in that respect, and there is no explanation for that. So some things will have an explanation. I don't say everything is a metaphysical paranormal experience that I can't immediately explain, but I'm totally open to it. But the fact that I can't and I'm looking for an answer makes it more real, whether it's one side or the other. I just need things to be defined in that way, I guess. And of course, when the metaphysical and paranormal, it's my personal beliefs. I'll give you an example. I was doing reincarnation regression, and I didn't know what to expect. And I started tapping into this life. It was where I was in a wheelchair for about 11 years. It was a miserable life. And then many of the lives that I tapped into that I saw, I was not a happy person. I was by myself. I was very lonely, and there was a theme of being alone, which kind of ties into my personality. It's like, I'm completely fine being at home by myself. I mean, it's like, that's not a problem for me. But anyway, I kind of saw through this life and what happened and kind of understood why I was alone and miserable and in a wheelchair and all these things. And I finally, passed away. But up until that point, I had never been able to sleep with a blanket on my feet or on my legs because I had like a claustrophobia kind of thing.
Yeah.
And after I tapped into that, I was able to pull the blankets up. And I remember I pulled the blankets up one night, and I just did it out of I don't know why, because I never did it any other night up to that point, and it didn't bother me. So it was a result of that. There was no expectations going into that regression of what would happen, what would change, or anything like that. To me, it was just kind of watching a mini movie in my head that was interesting. And again, was it my imagination? I don't know, but that happened after the fact. And I thought that was great because it's like my brain said, okay, now you've got some credentials to attach to this, showing that it wasn't just your imagination kind of thing. And even if it was my imagination, then there's the power of that being able to help me get past that claustrophobia. So call it metaphysics or paranormal or brain power, it doesn't matter. It's still, that's what happened. And I'm okay, so again, the labeling doesn't really, I don't get too bogged down with the labeling. I'm not going to scream it was a past life and this happened, but hey, that's how I'm perceiving it.
Yeah. I'm glad we're doing this. I'm glad you could join us on the virtual OC Paracon, because this interview, I actually learning a lot more about you than I have in the other ones. You just told me a second ago why I've liked you so much from the very beginning. You're a Capricorn, so am I. We were talking off the air. You're a Star Trek fan, so am I. I mean, we have all these things. We are into the paranormal, so yeah, Now it makes sense why I like talking to you every time you come on. So not that explained. I can see.
It's funny, Capricorns get a bad rap. We can be kind of harsh. And
Yeah.
someone said Capricorns are like likable jerks, and I'm like, well, okay, I guess I'll take that. But I did have a astrological reading done, and they said my moon was in Scorpio. I had no idea what that meant. Other, she said that takes the edge off of you, of that Capricorn. I said, okay, I'll take it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, actually, before we get into the books, when you started doing the research, I'm not gonna ask you what year it was, but we were around the same age. So I remember a time, as you probably do, and a lot of people watching this probably do also, when the paranormal, the supernatural, it wasn't as accepted, or we could talk about it as freely as we can right now. So where or who did you turn to start that research, to start learning about all the things that you were interested in?
So it was when I turned into that mall that day and just walked into the bookstore, and I met the assistant manager. His name was Dane, and he's the one who ended up channeling for me. And we had a friendship for a few years. And unfortunately, the store closed. But in the time that he worked there and we were friends, I devoured every book I could in there. Had regressions done, and I bought my own. And they were called cassette tapes, for those of you out there who aren't old enough to know what those are. But they were the younger, weaker brother of the CD back in the day. But they were just, to put me in the state of mind. It had certain tones, but I did everything I possibly could, astral projection, all that stuff, and just really focused and dove into every aspect. And what resulted were 7 short stories, and each one of them tackled a different subject: astral projection, seeing apparitions, reincarnation. All that stuff was covered in the books, and what happened to me. It is a fictional stories based on what happened to me to me at the time. And we had a good friendship, and we talked a lot about metaphysics. We lost touch, and I just continued on my own, and doing my own thing. And of course, when someone found out that I had those experiences, and they read the books and they reached out to me, a lot of Facebook groups and things like that, we shared what happened, shared our experiences. But yeah, after that, it was just it was me solo, and my family's like, that's cool, Gare. They're kind of like, good for you, but not a lot of strong interest in the metaphysics or paranormal from my family.
Yeah, I think it's typical parent, like, well, I mean, he's making a living, so he's okay.
Yeah, they're like, okay, not every, and I try to share stories, but my father is very left brain, and everything has an explanation. So and he likes to argue, so that's a lot of fun. I kind of just throw a ghost story out there just to see what's going to happen, but he means well, but it's all good.
Actually, that made me, I never asked you this. Did they ever experience, your brothers or your parents, did they ever experience anything in that house where you got your first experience?
They said no, and it was funny because I brought up stuff, and I'm like, hey, do you remember that happening? And they were like, they remember something about it, but their versions are different. And I'm like, okay, but I do remember standing in the kitchen. And they all remember this. We were all just standing there, and they're all holding these glasses. And I was watching my older brother talk, and I knew he was going to drop his glass. I just knew it. He was going to turn to put it on the counter, and he was going to miss. And I just waited. And at the time, it felt like forever. And as soon as he turned to put it on the counter, it fell out of his hand. And I grabbed it because I was waiting for it. And everybody turned and looked at me like, wow, what great reflexes. And I said I knew he was going to do it. And then, of course, they wanted me to have good reflexes. They didn't want me to know what was going to happen. That bothered them. But they all remember that.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's get into the books now. The talk about the first one and what you remember, good, bad, about writing your first paranormal book.
So my first book that never came to life was it was literally like a metaphysics 101. And like I said, it was going to tackle reincarnation, astral projection, the whole gamut. And I didn't like the way it was being structured. It was kind of coming across as like a textbook kind of thing, and I didn't like that. So I said, okay, let me back up. And I created a character based on me, and a couple other characters to kind of carry out the story of what happened to me. And the character's name is Greer, and Greer actually has the experiences I had, and they're pretty close to what happened. Of course, sometimes you have to embellish a little bit to make it a little bit bigger for the book or change some things. And I wrote 7 short stories called 7 Lessons. And each book, like I said, is a different subject matter. So there's 7 regressions, for the past life regressions, 7 projections for astral projections, 7 abductions where I talk about aliens, and so on through the books. And so I weave the characters together in a narrative connecting all those stories. And there was my initial foray into writing, and they were what they were, and I get a lot of great reviews, and it was a lot of fun. But I learned a lot about writing and showing, not telling, being more immersive. The reader really wants to get in there. To me, I was just sort of documenting what happened, rather than giving an immersive story where you could really get in there, experience it on a deeper level, have the characters really, the reader like the characters and buy into them and invest in them. So I learned that lesson with those first short stories. And so later when I wrote The Dead, which was actually literally everything that happened to me from the age of 12 when my bed levitated to 2014, which is when it was published, in chronological order. It was everything that happened to me, just black and white. Here it is. And it did really well. I went to #1 on Amazon in many categories and is a bestseller. And again, I write because I want to remember these things. I want to capture the memories and remember the details. So there's, my mother's passing is in that book, the things that happened to me early in life, my foray into metaphysics and all the past life regressions and all the things that resulted from it. I was getting older. I was starting to forget things, and I didn't want to forget things. I wanted to remember those things. So I made sure I got that book out. And it was sort of came about also because when people read 7 Lessons, they said, did all that happen to you, really? And I'm like, yes. I said, but let me just put it in black and white, what happened. And that's where The Dead came from.
Yeah, and then which leads to the Ghost Crimes series. That one, well, it's now a series. It started as when you started to write it. Was it going to be a series, or was it just going to be a one title book?
So Ghost Crimes came about. I did a compilation book for a rescue group. So I'm big into animal welfare and have lots of rescue dogs and support rescue dogs over the years. I worked in the pet industry for a long time. So I wrote a compilation book of adopted dogs for a group here in Tampa, and all the royalties were donated to the group. And so I said, okay, I want to do another compilation book. You write a narrative and then you want to go back to something different. And I said, let me write about first responders and their experiences of what they come across. Because you hear about, nurses and doctors and firemen and EMTs and policemen and all these folks that have these paranormal experiences, but they don't know what to make of it, and of course they don't want to report it half the time. Today it's a little bit different, but back in the day, nobody wanted to be the spooky Mulder from X-Files, that said I don't know, a ghost did it. That's you can't charge a ghost with a crime, right? Yeah. So that's where that kind of came from. So when I started to ask out there and say, hey, can you guys share some stories? And a lot of the stories that came in were things I had looked up on the internet and found out anyway. Some were a little bit different, but all of them said, hey, here's what happened. Don't use my name. It doesn't matter if you believe me or not. You asked, here's the information. And so through them, I said, hey, do you know anybody else? And so little by little, I got more stories. So the first book, I said, okay, let me started compiling them. But what dawned on me was, first, I have so much respect for first responders. These folks go out there and they leave their house every morning. They put their lives on the line for strangers, and their families wonder if they're going to be okay during the day. I imagine the spouses sigh relief when they come home each day. And it's, military, whoever you are, it's like, we really need to show more respect and gratitude to what they do. And, you don't know it until you really need them. At times you call 911 and those folks show up and that sort of thing. And I said, I really want to show the characters going through this and how it's affecting them. And I couldn't do it in one little blurb. Here's what happened to Joe from New Jersey, this day. So I created characters through Ghost Crimes, and I wove those stories into a narrative and how it affected them. And it was pretty dark in the beginning. That first book's pretty dark compared to the other two, but there were some dark stories, so I didn't have a choice. And so anyway, that's how that book came to be. And to answer your question, no, it was going to be a standalone. And I wrote it, but then I was like, I really like these characters, and I still had more stories that had been given to me. And so I said, okay, so then I just continued their growth, and I've actually finished the third book, so it's a trilogy now. So the Ghost Crimes Trilogy is out, but I was able to bring the characters out of the darkness and into a lighter spot, which I really enjoyed doing because it was so heavy and they went through so much darkness in the beginning. So the first book actually spans like 15, 20 years. And then I bring them in the real time in the second book, and then bring them to current time by the third book.
So without this is a part where you have to tiptoe around this answer, because the third one isn't out yet. Those of you that are fans and you've been waiting for the third one, here's a little tease for that one. I'll just say, have you say the ending, the way you end the story, is it satisfying to you, or do you wish, now that it's done, do you wish you can go back and change anything about it?
No, it's very satisfying to me because I I think I did it, or I tried very hard to pay homage to these first responders and what they do, and give them some peace and light. Now, the trilogy is this it's a three-story arc from the three books, but it doesn't finish out. There is room for the fourth and the fifth book, but I did want to finish from the first book and bring it to an end here. But I brought the characters to a place of they're in a much stronger and happier place at this point. They figured out the dynamics. No, I'm very happy with it. We'll see what the readers say, but
Yeah.
I'm pretty happy with it. Um, yeah, so like I said, and I did something interesting in the books too, where I have my main story, but I brought first responders to a sort of weekly support group kind of meeting thing where they just share their experiences. They're not real sure what happened, but they had a paranormal experience. They share it. Maybe somebody offers their insight, maybe they don't, but they were able to kind of share with like-minded people that, hey, this happened, and someone says, yeah, that happened to me too. Whether you're a nurse or fireman or EMT, you're just sharing things that happen, and I'm able to get a lot of stories that are sort of like one-offs in there in that way. But again, I'm showcasing what these individuals do, what nurses go through, or healthcare workers, and all these folks, what they experience. And there's some trauma when you experience not just their daily responsibilities, but when there's a paranormal aspect. Like I said, not everybody's like me and you. Something paranormal happens, it rocks the foundation of some people because they
Yeah.
need things to be black and white, and I understand that. So they need a place to kind of help work through that. So I wove that into the story, and again, that was more just to show my reverence to those folks.
Yeah, yeah. I was gonna say, especially first responders, because yeah, it's tough. I, me and some other guests, we've compared them, to use a sports analogy, to offensive linemen. We're in the middle of football season now, as you guys are watching this, but the offensive linemen, they're very important, or nothing happens on the offense, but you don't know about them until they either do a great job, and even then they may not get the credit. The quarterback gets that, but when it's those penalties, the holds, and all that, that's when you get their names. Here, it's kind of the same thing, where you don't really appreciate them, or remember that they're there, until, like you said earlier, you have to call them, and then you really really need them. And I met a lot of them that, yeah, they've had some experiences, but they just don't know who to share with. Kind of like pilots. Also, we're seeing a lot of more of it now. We're also seeing the footage that they recorded, but now finally pilots are being allowed, if you will, to come out and say, yeah, I not only did I see something, I went chasing it in my
Yeah,
aircraft. So yeah, hopefully the over on the first responder side, we're getting. In fact, that reminds me, we're doing OC Paracon. I met. They were going to be at this year's in person one. uh, their first responders, they started a paranormal investigation group there in Shasta County. It's a paranormal triage. Shout out to Brenda and Ryan. They 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 haven't had a lot of experiences while on duty, but they've had many in their own family and at different locations. So they're, at least as far as I know, they're the first responders that actually start a paranormal investigation group and are starting to offer their services. So they're pretty brand new. I really can't wait to see what they do and how they do it, especially because I'm pretty sure they're going to approach it differently than the typical paranormal investigator or ghost hunter. Again, because they come from the first responder, there's going to be a little bit more, I'll say, respect for, because they know that they unfortunately do get to see an experience when someone's life ends, and they do cross over sometimes, not always, in a peaceful way, because that's why they call them there. So I'm sure they have a respect for that, and I'm sure they're going to bring that into their investigations. So like I said, really looking forward to see how they handle their investigations.
sure. And there was I think back in the day too, it wasn't that they were worried someone would think they were crazy, but you don't want your boss having a lack of confidence in you,
Yeah.
by saying something that might not be, perceived as, yeah. So there's a perception piece there that, could threaten your job. There's so many things to consider, when you're out there. But I do remember in my research that, looking at, case files, when a report or crime happens, it's different, in different states, but each part of the case file denotes like the state, the county, the type of crime it was. And I remember it was there was actually a paranormal code for the case file and I was like, wow, that's something I wouldn't expect to see, but I guess that's a thing now. That there was, they witnessed something paranormal but yeah, so it's out there.
Yeah, and I'm assuming that was recent because I'm sure that wasn't the case, 20, 30 years ago, for sure.
Exactly. When I think about it, someone reports a domestic disturbance, they show up and there's a couple and one of them has visible bruises and they're both saying that it wasn't the other one that did it. There's something in the house there, there's a poltergeist, whatever you want to call it. There's something in there. And of course, you think that the other person, they're just covering up for each other kind of thing, but you can't go back and say the ghost did it. It's just not something you can go back and say, you gotta get a little more, comprehensive there.
Yeah. That I mean, it was Hollywooded up because it has to be, it's a movie, but the last Conjure movie was actually about that, covered that a little. The devil made me do it.
Yeah.
It was that case. So it was a little bit of that. That was the first time from what I understand that, the Warrens dealt with that case where it was literally blaming the devil. It wasn't just a ghost, it was the devil that caused that murder. So yeah, that's there. And then that's something that first responders, they, like I said, they sometimes have to deal with, but they don't know who to, because a family, when it's the family of the victims, they don't want to hear what was a ghost. They need to blame someone. They need justice. So yeah, it can be really hard for them. So, when is the third one expected out for everybody?
Well, it'll be out by the time this airs.
Okay. So and then you said you're gonna collect all three of them.
Yep. So it'll have 3 books out there. Ghost Crimes, the first one. The second book is Ghost Crimes 2, The Paranormal Enemy, and the third book is Ghost Crimes, an Unholy Trinity. And so I'm going to put them all together in one collection. So there'll be one paperback available out there for sale as well.
Okay. So that is Gare Allen. That is a story. We're gonna take a little bit of a break. You guys are gonna see the sponsor. And if you've been watching all the other panels, you know who the sponsors are. You're gonna see them again. But we're gonna be back. Another thing you've been seeing everybody do is, it is October. 'Tis that season. We talk about tricks and treats. We've been giving you, not tricks, we've been giving you treats. So Gare also has a treat for one lucky viewer out there right now. I think you know what it is. You just don't know what it is exactly. We'll tell you that in just a second.
OC Paracon 2023 is sponsored by Alien Soda Company, for all things out of this world. Visit aliensodacompany.shop and use coupon code PERCEPTION at checkout for 10% off your order. Coffinco.com, makers of coffin-shaped wireless phone chargers. Lay your phone to rest. Paralinked, the social networking site for paranormal enthusiasts by paranormal enthusiasts. Visit paralink.com today. American Ghost Walks. Reserve your seat on the Hollywood Haunted Bus Tour today at AmericanGhostWalks.com. Psychic and trance medium and paranormal investigator Jade Foster. Book a reading with Jade Foster today. And AirPoint Heating and Air Conditioning. Get ready for fall and winter with their $69 furnace tune-up special. Visit airpointhvac.com.
So we're back, and like I said, we're about to give you a treat, as all the other panels I've been doing. So, Gare, go ahead and give them, we're going to give you a question. You've been answering questions. The question is going to be what, Gare?
All right. So the question is, I referenced my first paranormal experience when I was 12 years old, where my bed levitated off the floor. And I also referenced a tapestry that was on the wall that I found underneath my bed. And there was a particular singer that was featured on that tapestry. So who was that singer?
Yeah, so we are looking for the name of the singer that was on that tapestry. Send it to the email that you see flashing on your screen right now. It's only for this weekend, only for OC Paracon weekend. Come Monday, we won't be doing that anymore, but one of you will hear from us, and you will win. What will they get, Gare?
So I will send you an autographed copy of the Ghost Crimes Trilogy.
Yeah, not the new one, all three of them. So if you were loving what he was saying about the series, now you can get the entire series. So again, give him the question one more time.
So the question is, during my first paranormal experience when I was 12 years old, my bed levitated, and I found a tapestry that was hanging on my wall underneath the bed. And this tapestry featured a particular singer that I referenced earlier.
Yeah, so send the answer to that, again, that email that's been flashing down below. You see it there. You can't miss it. It's like flashing right in front of me. So send it right there, and we'll pick one of the correct answers randomly, and you will hear from us this coming Monday. So, Garrett, to wrap up, let everybody know your websites, social media, everywhere we can follow everything that you have now and have coming up.
All right. So you can follow me on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok. So at Gare Allen. You can go to my website, which is gareallen.com. So nothing scheduled the rest of 2023, but we have some things brewing for early 2024. But I will post all that information on my website and also on social media. So please follow me.
I see what you did there. Brewing like witches brew because it's October and Halloween season. So Gare Allen, author. I have all the books. Everything is. We'll link it up on the show description also for you guys. Make it all easy. Gare, thanks a lot. And because, like I said, it is the season. Have a happy Halloween.
You too, Henry. Thank you so much.